I am coming to you from Dharawal country in New South Wales, Australia, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past and present, the traditional owners of this land, of which I'm presenting on. So we heard a lot about chess through Marek this morning, and we'll continue on the theme by creating a double-edged sword motif, or one that's related to dual use. So, as we're talking today throughout all the sessions, and we're talking about all these amazing advancements we're witnessing before us, and some of us are testing and experimenting with them in our research, I want you to think about how these technologies, these advancements might well be misused, and to go a little bit outside the personal context of which we've been speaking about today. For example, myself, us as collaborators, as researchers, as individuals, in the context of academia. And Marek pointed to many examples this morning of industry applications of AI and generative AI specifically, the way that they could be incorporated into strategy, uh, sort of, he said, sparring with the AI, asking potentially who the smartest person was in the AI model, and it was the model itself in one of the examples. But then to look at sensitive data, as he spoke about, in the context of government agencies, local governments, state governments, our personal data. And he did note so many warnings this morning about research ethics. Would he or would anyone in academia go and feed interviews into a generative AI tool just to see what would come out in terms of a thematic analysis, perhaps? And there are mechanisms by which we've shared this morning. You can use these tools in your own environment, in your personal computer, unhooking the internet, and perhaps doing some uh, example work. Now, when we look at content analyzers or concept maps, or how we've actually used Bayesian theory to create tools that allow us to distill large quantitative data of a qualitative nature into thematic chunks using hits or some other descriptors, we have been very successful in the past. And everybody knows about NVivo, of course, and so many other content analyzers on the market. Let's go outside that now and really focus on dual use. The paper that I'm about to present was inspired by research that I've conducted with Jordan Richard Schoner from Canada, and also my colleague at Arizona State University, Professor Kathleen Vogel. And it's looking really at failures in the loop. And when we deploy these, not just use them as experimental applications, what may eventuate. And just this vanilla definition here of almost all technology being dual use to some degree means it can have both a civilian and military purpose. And when you look at the military context, we can see that there have been massive advancements in operations research through different times in history when we have looked at advancements in computing, particularly in the context of World War II, defense, and many other wars that and conflicts that we've seen, whether that's been advancements in drones or the mechanism of AI to some degree. Many people have talked about this as the fourth offset, that AI is this fourth offset. So this feature creates a dilemma for cooperation. States can design arms control institutions to curtail costly competition over some military technology, but they also do not want to limit valuable civilian uses. And this is where we're at. We can see the value to us as researchers, but we can also see the potential harms. But when we unleash these harms into society, because they are the basis or underbelly of a government application, and we don't have to look too far to describe some of these failures en masse, we then have some implications, and these things play out in the courts. So while we're thinking about the advancement of AI in our own context throughout the whole day, I also want you to think about how these advancements can be misused. We wrote a paper last year with Dr. Robert Abbas and Professor George Roussos, and we said it seems no matter how we position AI, the very techniques and methods that can be applied to create an application with positive impact for humanity can also be inverted and appropriated to produce negative outcomes. And today we'll be talking about positive intentionality and negative intentionality throughout. And here's this classic game of chess. We all know what this feels like when we're versing a friend. And everyone's using sort of the same powers to be to win. Okay? Keep this motif. In this instance, again, look at this title, The Impact of AI on Chess, a Double-Edged Sword. And we did see the last example from Marek on Stockfish versus ChatGPT, and ChatGPT making up some maneuvers. And he said only the expert would be able to spot this. However, when we look at the externalities, the negative externalities, more than just individuals can spot these because they are the victims of the AI. And I'm talking about humans here. So when we do design, develop, and deploy, we have to assess what we're doing as decision makers. And we have to think about the motivation behind the development of the AI, the responsibility for initiating, monitoring, and regulating its development, the characteristics of group decision-making processes, and how values and risk management have been incorporated into the stages of development and implementation. The responsibility for continual monitoring and regulation of AI following implementation, and at what point do you de-implement AI, and when is that applicable? Who decides? And at each of these stages, there are decision makers. And what we've seen, there are 4 phases in any AI's life cycle. Sullivan and Fosso-Wamba talk about these in the business literature. So you initiate where ideas are explored, build and train, where data is prepared and trained and models evaluated. We deploy where the AI models are run and tested, and then we manage and operate where the AI is monitored and insights are obtained regarding quality, performance, and fairness. So in this way, we can talk about responsibility being assigned to different entities at different stages of the AI life cycle. But one's actions can have multiple outcomes. Our decisions can have positive and negative effects. And it's not enough to say that that individual is to blame for an error or the intentionality to begin with was negative. We need to look at organizational strategies and actually national strategies. The US in particular are thinking about the national strategies, as are the EU, to try and provide some guardrails and some kind of standard process that organizations also need to abide by. So we need to test our ideas against our organizational policies, but as well the national strategies where they exist, and even some of the international governance that is beginning to be shared worldwide. So embedding positive intentionality is about tech for good, whether the designer or developer, the entrepreneur or strategist, how they choose to apply AI in the name of digital transformation of organizations and society matters. Each decision is value-laden. Each decision point and context of implementation requires the consideration of multiple stakeholder values, many of which are actually in conflict today. And these issues are difficult for humans to sort out. But we are also seeing negative intentionality purposefully, deliberately being deployed in not so good tech. Here we can talk about the intentional use of behavioral engineering techniques to try and sway a user's decisions, actively working to modify behaviors toward addiction or nudge voters or consumers or gamers for that matter in particular ways. These are dark patterns of design. And here we could talk about self-disclosure. We could talk about sharing of location data. We could talk about the constant auto scrolling of different apps and video content, and also in-game purchasing, among many other kinds of patterns of design that are dark. And this can lead to both short-term individual problems and long-term societal problems, fragmented work, impoverished social experiences, and a loss of privacy. Now, 3 of the case studies I'm going to share with you today are actual cases, one of which, the first, harm against workers, has already played out in the courts among many different jurisdictions. The middle one is just about to be raised in a court of law. It's harm against children. I'm not talking about the traditional harms, for example, where privacy of children's data has been breached, but rather the way that children are being used as free labor in the data annotation of different applications, most of which are social media based. And the third is a prospective case it's harm against those living with disability. And in each of these three different areas, harms against the worker, harms against children, harms against those living with disability, what I'm advocating here with the team is that there should be socio-technical risk registers, which anticipate the potential problems that may arise when we are doing seemingly innocent things like surveilling whether workers are doing their work appropriately based on tasks, or whether children are using applications at an age-appropriate level and sharing data. And for those who perhaps haven't provided their informed consent for their visual images or voice patterns to be taken, downloaded, and then put through analyzers. And all of these are AI based, as we'll see here in the literature. And what's difficult here to try and ascertain is at what point do we say we have figured out the optimal way to start to introduce AI into our workplaces for well-being, for example, as opposed to productivity scoring of individual workers towards their dismissal. And we have seen a lot of people go online that have been hired, particularly by the gig economy, saying, I just started 4 weeks ago. I haven't been able to make a deal, but I have shown, right down to the end of the task process that I was very close to brokering a deal, but I'm being dismissed, and on what basis? And we have AI tools now that are acting as monitoring and auditing tools, but not for the worker, very much against the worker. So workers in factories and warehouses, among many other contexts, are having their every move and work break monitored by AI-based apps that are acting to cut pay, reduce work hours, or even fire employees. Performance data in the workplace is being gathered and analyzed, and we're seeing fines being handed down. Two companies that we all know about is Deliveroo and Fudino. Both fined millions of dollars by the Italian privacy regulator for using algorithms that discriminated against some gig economy workers. And I won't go into the details, you can read them on your own, but it's about whether we are productivity scoring for the support and advancement of the worker or for their ultimate dismissal. We're then looking at the potential for users to become the ones that are the data labelers, basically providing free labor to these organizations. We have heard about the $2 per hour payment that OpenAI has used to pay Kenyan workers, the Global South, or even prisoners. And this is a well-known issue. But when the issue is children are not being paid anything to divulge data about where they are, what photos they've taken, who they're with, down to a very granular level, then we are having a major issue here with the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Very much on the last case study here that I'll show is that genetic rare disease now can be denoted by the use of facial features. Here we talk about genotypes and phenotypes. I won't go into the science, but just to say that it is possible now with the 40 billion images that can be web scraped off the internet for individuals to use particular analyzers, of which I'm not 100% sure on the accuracy, and neither are the people who develop these tools, although they are being sold. I can provide for you example company names offline, but we are seeing the potential to screen our workers in a workplace for rare diseases which are musculoskeletal, and that really has to do with eyes, ears, distances between the nose and mouth, and so many other things, eyelids, and much more. And here is a breach of privacy, apart from the fact that the individual worker may not know they're carrying the rare disease. But how may we in the future be very much discriminated against based on our visualizations? So just quickly here to end, before we go to some questions, perhaps, if we have time, we're looking for proportional responses, rights, and action. Regulators must respond with swift action, sending a clear message that exploitative and manipulative practices relating to these types of technologies are unacceptable. And in the spirit of participative design or co-design, the end user should be brought into the process of decision-making at the initial phases of conception. If this is a tool that you want to roll out to your human resource skills base at work, your employees, that is, you should be telling them what you're about to unleash. The design of algorithms and AI that address stakeholder needs consistent with human rights can be deployed, and the emphasis is on process-oriented approaches to design away from techno-solutionism. And really here we're talking about the policy practice pacing problem. And to finish off, regulation is often presented as a solution. However, governments are really slow at regulating. They're not as nimble or innovative as the companies that create these applications. So we have a mismatch to begin with. And the designers and developers themselves have begun to ask for help when their solutions are sufficiently novel that there are no legal precedents or design principles to guide them. So we're getting ahead of ourselves. But is there a way for which we can create innovative ways to respond with perhaps standards that are built within 1 to 2 years, even though for some people that may be too late, but also to do the appropriate thing when we decide to unleash a tool to begin with. So the pervasive question of our time concerns what happens when techno-opportunism exceeds existing laws, regulations, and standards. And much like science, the imperative is typically to create rather than regulate.
Give him some work, some
Thank
life
you.
on his resume, so he's now actually able to sort of pursue his next ambition in his career, which is really cool.
That's fantastic. What a network. Anyone else have a good question?
Okay, sorry, we've just muted that person there. Thank you so much, Katina. That was fantastic. There were a couple of questions in the chat. Just go back to that.
Yes, how might we get children's perspectives about AI? Well, we've already started to do that. I was the working group chair for the IEEE 2089 standard, age-appropriate digital services for children, of which many children were consulted, and we're seeing this. In fact, it was children who brought to my attention one particular very well-known social media app I won't name was actually using a tool. They actually, a group of children in my vehicle requested how they could get rid of the AI client. And of course, I tried and couldn't, and then realized in the rules or in the policy guidelines, you couldn't delete that. So if you want to delete it, you got to delete the app. But if children are using this and don't want to, they can speak up, but they're not going to be writing out to the organization to say, can this feature be switched off, please? But children are being asked invasive questions in terms of their data annotation and free data labor, such as the first question that a child will get on this particular app is this a banana? And of course, the app knows it's not a banana. It wants to prompt the child for an artifact and an object, a name. And once the child does disclose that, it then starts to incrementally try to allow the child or force the child or nudge the child to further self-disclose. So it goes from, is this a banana, to, okay, it's a chair uh, in a vehicle, and then where are you? In which street? In which suburb? And
Goodness.
yeah, this is factual, and you can ask your children about it. Again, many of these apps are getting away with lots of things, but it's free labor. That's in the rights of the Convention of a Child. That's just not on. Apart from the fact that this is very sneaky, you can't switch it off.
Katina, I'm going to have to stop you now. I'm
Let's
sorry we
do
have to
that.
keep to schedule, but thank you so much. There are questions in the chat for you. We encourage everyone to connect with Katina. Go to our Padlet. Katina's put her profile there. Please connect with each other. This was so interesting. I'm quite nervous actually after listening to everything you said, but we really appreciate your insights and thank you so much for your time today.